Good morning, and yes, thank you so much for coming, and thanks to everyone who tried to make it into the room as well and got turned away. Hopefully you can watch it on the recording later on. Today I'd like to talk to you about a recent GIS project from the National Archives called Voices of the Victorian Poor, and our experience of using historical data sets with ArcGIS software to bring history alive, not geography this time, to school students and connect them with their tangible world around them. Firstly, let me give you a little bit of background about myself and the archives. My name is Rosie Morris and I am the Education Web Officer at the National Archives. That means I have the wonderful job of creating teaching resources using our historical documents and putting them online for free for teachers to use in their classrooms around the world. The National Archives itself is the archive of the government, with records dating back over 1,000 years. From medieval charters to modern day tweets from Downing Street, we keep it all for the public and provide access to everyone. We're open and free for the public to visit. You can get a reader's card and order up pretty much any open public document for you to look at yourself in our reading room, though some of the more special documents like Doomsday Book are kept in our safe room and only come out for special occasions, I'm afraid. Today I'm here to talk about a newly published ArcGIS Hub site and maps which explore one particular collection from the archives, and that is a collection called MH12. This means it is the 12th record series within the Ministry of Health Collections, MH, and it holds correspondence related to the administration of the New Poor Law of 1834. This was a sort of early benefit system in the Victorian era, providing food, tools, clothing and funding for those in poverty in the 18 and early 1900s. It also administered the workhouse system for those in complete destitution. There are over 16,000 massive volumes, such as the one that you can see here on the screen, and each one of these contains hundreds, if not thousands, of individual letters, reports, witness statements, written by the poor themselves and their advocates advocating for their benefit. This means we have detailed accounts of the lives of the poor, written by the poor themselves. They've written to the poor law administrators asking for relief or questioning some aspect of the system. Each letter tells the point of view of the pauper, describing their situation, often providing very personal details about their family, state of health, problems with employment or trade, and describing emotively why they need the support that the poor laws were designed to provide. It's as if Oliver Twist sat down and wrote his own story in great detail, except every character from our collection was a real person who lived between 1834 and 1910 in Britain. The collection goes a long way to counter misunderstandings about things like levels of literacy and agency within the Victorian poor, whose prolific writing shows a great desire to stand up for their rights and request for the help that was available to them, often to try and keep themselves out of the workhouse and surviving in the community. It's the single largest collection in the Ministry of Health records, the second largest being First World War medical records, with only 5,500 volumes. So you can see that this is a very, very significant collection. So large that most people have never heard of it and could never really hope to comprehend it and understand it in its entirety. Which begs the question, how can you begin to study such a vast collection? And that's where we come in. The Voices of the Victorian Poor project builds on an Arts and Humanities Research Council funded project called In Their Own Right, which catalogued and transcribed thousands of these letters in our collection. A sample of 102 poor law unions were selected from across the country, shaded here in blue, to provide a decent overview of experience in different regions, a mix of urban and rural communities, and then our follow-on project took this data set and began categorising and tagging its content with the view of creating an ArcGIS-based database to provide access to these letters digitally for the first time. This is an example of the spreadsheet we created, the dataset feeding our maps, which I will show you in a moment. I've zoomed out to show you just a hint of the scale of the dataset that we're working with, but you can see from the scroll bar on the side that this is just the tip of the iceberg of that spreadsheet as well. Each individual letter has the address of the sender broken down into street, town, and county for georeferencing, often with the addition of a modern county where historical borders have shifted, as well as their poor law union for further reference where there's a little bit of confusion about counties or duplicated place names. Then the thematic content or specific detail has been tagged with a simple Y or an N per category saying whether that topic features within the letter. This sounds simple enough on a small scale, but with over 3,500 letters in our sample, it was a massive undertaking, and we are very grateful for the transcription work of our volunteers and the tagging work of our data officer, Natalie Carter, who provided such a detailed understanding of the data. Though most letters provided a fairly clear address, thanks to the letter writing custom and also the writer's desire for an actual reply with aid, not every letter was easily located. For example, where does this letter belong? William Clark Sr. writes from number 6 Caroline Street, which is here, Arlington Street, which is here, Mornington Crescent, which is here, and Hampstead Road, which is here. The Victorian postman, who knew the local area, could probably deliver it, or at least ask around the locals until Mr. Clark was found, but we had to use our best guess to place it as close as possible to the first line of the address. Pause for a drink for a second. These addresses also give clues to the transient lives of the poor in the Victorian era, who often lived in boarding houses and moved between several on a nightly basis, so perhaps had no set address to which the poor law administrators could respond, giving only a rough location so that they could try and be found. William Clark himself writes from several addresses between 1840 and 1842, suggesting that he moved twice while corresponding with the Union. Where no address could be found, we have located the letter within the main town or the workhouse of the Poor Law Union to which that letter was associated. And while we've done our best to check the data, our wonderful country has many place names that are duplicated in different counties, so we welcome any corrections or any feedback that you may have to our georeferencing through our feedback form within the website should you spot any place that has been misplaced in your own exploration of our collection. Once the letters were tagged and georeferenced, we were able to start building our educational resource within an ArcGIS Hub site. This tool allowed us to add plenty of contextual material to the maps and the dashboards we were creating, and support the different audiences that we hope to reach with our collection through their use of the maps. The primary school portal allows the youngest students to explore the letters as an aspect of local history, using a simple ArcGIS map to enter a location and view letters nearby. In creating the maps for this section, we have also filtered out any particularly distressing content from the collection that would be unsuitable for young audiences, though we do advise teachers still explore the map for themselves before setting any activity for students to explore independently. The lives of the poor were very tough. Our sample activity, Mapping John Hankerson, shows how this map can then be used to practice cross-curricular activities, linking history with geography skills, as we ask them to make measurements and consider different routes, consider how different routes change the distance that John has to travel. The letter that this activity is based on also features within our Workhouse Voices document collection on the National Archives website, which we have audio transcribed with the help of some wonderful voice actors, allowing students to hear the voice of the letter, as well as explore its content in detail. A link to this can be found on the activity within the resource itself. And this is the letter that we're exploring. It reads, "I am John Hankerson, pauper who belongs to the township of Timperley near Altrincham and also belongs to Knutsford Workhouse." To run through this activity very quickly, we asked the students to locate the towns that John mentions in the letter, Timperley and Knutsford, and measure the distance between them. This is the distance that 64-year-old John and his wife Catherine have to walk in order to enter the workhouse. Its distance is about 7 miles as the crow flies, as you can see on the map. However, that's probably not the route that they would take, so we then asked the students to consider other likely routes they would take using the roads, which would add several more miles to the journey, as you can see. We then further complicate the story by pointing out that there is actually a nearer workhouse at Chorlton up here, whereas Timperley is down here. But explain that much like local councils today, the poor law unions were run as administrative units, and your aid came centrally from that union rather than the workhouse in closest proximity. So he couldn't travel the 4 miles, he had to travel the 9. Here you can see some examples of Victorian OS maps, which are freely available from the National Library of Scotland, which shows the imposing structures of the workhouses themselves and can help to illustrate the historical aspect of the activity, as well as allow students to see where the old roadways would have been should they want a historically accurate route to map within the activity. And John actually tells us the answer to this inquiry himself in his letter. He belongs to Knutsford Workhouse. Knutsford was our union workhouse. That's the reason he has to travel so far. For secondary age students, we have created another portal to provide a more detailed approach to the content of the Poor Law and explore the different factors of Victorian life displayed within the letters. We've created informative pages on different aspects of the Poor Law and the MH12 collection, providing context for the maps before the students encounter the letters themselves. These have been written by historians who have been studying the documents for years, providing the trusted expert background behind the resource. There are also details requested by teacher scholars, 11 teachers who we worked with on the research project, to create free-to-download ready-made lesson plans for primary and secondary audiences, which you can find within the site to support the use of the maps within a larger scheme of work. Then, to guide their studies, we have provided a series of topical dashboards to help focus the letters, allowing them to explore themes of health, crime, protest, poverty, life in the workhouse, and childhood, all themes that link to the GCSE history curricula. We hope to add a further dashboard on industry and trade soon, linking into the poor's experience of the Industrial Revolution and the changes it brought to society at the time. Students are free to explore the maps themselves and can again zoom in on a local area as a point of interest and explore the national picture using filters and statistical counts to help comprehend the scale of the issues faced by the poor across the country. Here we have examples from the medicine dashboard. No, they're both protest. From the protest dashboard, sorry, where Bertrand Bouvier is complaining about the quality of food at the workhouse, where children cannot eat fruit despite the fact that they are growing plenty in the workhouse garden. Then here we have Mary Kelly, an Irish immigrant in York, who is protesting her lack of access to poor law services as immigrants did not qualify for support. It's a brilliant way of also getting women's history into the classroom. We want to take the ideas a step further, or indeed for higher education or general public audiences that have an interest in the letters or the GIS maps. We have also used Experience Builder to create a freeform research map. This map provides access to all of the letters with a timeline filter to explore particular decades or key moments within the century, as well as filters for the granular detail of every category we tagged within the dataset, allowing the creation of very specific inquiry questions, exploring comorbidities or trends across time. This research map also allows searching by writer's name or union, useful for potential local or family history research, or mentions of key figures like the philanthropist Joseph Rowntree and Edwin Chadwick, whose report led to the workhouse system itself. Keyword searching of transcripts is also available of every single letter within the database, allowing students and teachers to explore the dataset in bespoke ways not included in our original tagging. The map is now published and is freely available for everyone to explore. We presented it to teachers this past weekend at the Historical Association conference up in Harrogate, and this closing word cloud shows just some of the feedback that we received from them about the resource. ArcGIS has allowed us to bring together the vast collection held in individual volumes and return each letter to their original local context, connecting the voices of the individual paupers back to their local communities and providing access to the centralised collection in a brand new, highly visual, engaging and interactive way. We are very glad to see this recognised in the feedback provided by the teachers, and we hope that you would use similar words based on what you have seen here today. It's been a fantastic project to work on, and it has really demonstrated the value that GIS can provide to large geographically linked datasets like the MH12 collection. We've many ideas on further archival collections that we can explore, and we hope that we have inspired you to consider historical datasets as a source of GIS mapping and for any educational resources that you might create in the future. If you have any questions, please do feel free to ask, and you can contact me on the email address shown here. Thank you.
Rosie, thank you so much for that. It is, even though I've seen this a few times now, those Victorian stories are always kind of thrilling to sort of see brought to life and kind of coming off the page like that. And there is some time and space now for some questions. If anybody has got any, if you can raise your hand, then I will run to you with a microphone so that you can be heard by everybody here. Yep.
Hi, thank you. That was wonderful. I was just wondering what the timescale was to digitise all of that information and kind of, yeah, what time frame did you work over?
Yeah, so the original In Their Own Right project was a 3-year cataloguing project, so the actual kind of transcribing of all of the individual documents took the bulk of the time, and a team of, I believe, 15 volunteers all working on the letters together. But the actual creation of the GIS maps took probably about 6 months from the original kind of process of trying to tag through the spreadsheet and get all of the spreadsheet work ready. And then when we actually had that ready and putting it into the system, probably 2 months in trying to get it to the stage where it's at now, where it's accessible and searchable, and all of the kind of filters are working, and yeah, designed for the different audiences as well. So a relatively fast turnover once the actual kind of data is ready, and it's getting that spreadsheet right in the first place that takes the most time. But hopefully you can see that it was working.
Thank you. Any more questions for Rosie?
Yeah.
Thank you. Great presentation. Did you look at any sort of automated ways to capture the information, or was it just transcribe manual data entry?
Yeah, so all of the letters are handwritten by various members of the board themselves who have various qualities of handwriting and levels of literacy. So there are systems like Transcribus and like other kind of digital readers that could scan the documents and attempt to make transcripts. But we find that the most accurate way to do it is to get people to do it themselves, especially when the handwriting and the literacy levels vary so greatly across the collection. Where it's been, one scribe working over time, and that you can kind of teach an AI or something to understand the handwriting a little bit better, those systems tend to work a little bit better. But for this, to really make sure that we got as accurate as possible, yeah, volunteers were the way to go.
Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned it's available to primary schools. What sort of ages are you looking at?
Sure. So we focused on Key Stage 2 with the local history kind of curriculum in mind. Some of the content is quite distressing. These are people talking about very difficult situations. Like I said, we tried to filter out the heaviest hitting of the material. But other than that, also just the way that they're talking about their lives is quite lengthy and detailed, and requires a relatively high reading age. Not overly high, and it can be supported by teachers in primary schools, absolutely. But just to try and allow the school students to have a bit more autonomy and independence in looking at the system, we would recommend Key Stage 2.